Thank you so much, Jen. I really am privileged to be able to share the podium with you today. And good afternoon, everybody. So, I think that President Biden asked me to be the Secretary of Energy because I was the governor during a time when the auto industry was on its knees and when auto workers were finding themselves out of work through no fault of their own. I feel like I have looked into the eyes of people who have been desperate and at a loss more times than I can count. And I was also governor when we invested to diversify Michigan's economy to build Car 2.0, which is the electric vehicle, and the guts to that vehicle, the battery. And now here we are 12 years later, and General Motors is saying that their entire fleet is going to be electrified. It is a huge distance that we've traveled, and so much of that is thanks to the decision by the federal government to invest in saving the backbone of the manufacturing industry, which was at that point the or the vehicle industry. The Obama-Biden efforts really made a statement and worked. And so we can do so much more than what we did in Michigan, and this is what the American Jobs Plan is all about. I feel so happy for America that we have a president who wants to invest in our country and in our workers and in our manufacturing. And so, to me, the fact that there is out there globally a $23 trillion market for clean energy products, for products that will reduce greenhouse gas emissions, is a massive opportunity for this country. And you better believe that other countries are seeing that opportunity as well. And our economic competitors are working to corner the market on those opportunities. Countries like China are pressing their foot on the pedal and revving up their electric engines, and they are thrilled to see that the United States is standing still while they are working to create jobs for their people. After I was finished being governor, I traveled to China to see their clean energy efforts. I was with a group, and we went to a city, and I was standing next to the mayor of the city in China, and during a demonstration, he leaned over to me and he said, "So, when do you think the United States is going to get a clean energy plan?" And at this point, and this was several years ago, I said, "Oh, I don't know, there's so much polarization, it's difficult in Congress to get consensus." And he just looked at me and he smiled and he said, "Take your time. Take your time." Because they saw our passivity as their opportunity. And it's not just in China, it's in other countries too. Understandably, countries want to corner this market on clean energy products because we have 195 countries who have committed to lowering their greenhouse gas emissions. So the question is, where are those products going to be built and who are they going to be built by? And it's going to take a lot of work, literally. We need millions of people in the United States working to lower greenhouse gas emissions. And we all know that in the 21st century, making sure that we have the right infrastructure is critical. Infrastructure is, yes, roads and bridges, but it is ports and airports, and it is trains, and it is the pipes that pump water into our homes, and it is the broadband that brings the world and learning to our children. It's the broadband that brings economic opportunity to our businesses. Of course, it's the electrical grid that keeps the lights on after what happened in Texas. Can anybody really doubt that electricity and the electric grid is part of the foundation of who we are as a nation, and we need to invest in it if we want to make sure power keeps coming to our homes. There's an interesting poll that was done in February by Consumers Reports, and they found that 76% of Americans think that broadband is as important as electricity and water. I mean, how can we not agree that broadband is infrastructure? And yet, we have been disinvesting in infrastructure as a nation for decades, in infrastructure, in research and development, and in manufacturing. All of them we have been disinvesting in. Infrastructure, as you know, is now the smallest share of our economy since World War II. We are at a 72-year low with respect to manufacturing. Research and development has been dropping since the 1960s. China and our economic competitors are investing in research and development because they want to seize the future. They want to surpass the United States. And if we allow that to happen, we will be weaker as a nation and we will fall. And we cannot do that. And that's what this American Jobs Plan is all about. So we can't just sit around saying we need to do this. It's bipartisan. We know that Republicans and Democrats, it's a joke in Washington, Infrastructure Week, and Democrats and Republicans have been making that joke, but it's not a joke anymore. We need to get it done. And there is bipartisan support for these elements, these basic elements. So starting on Inauguration Day, just to say a word about what DOE, Department of Energy, has been doing, we've been rolling out efforts to research and development and deploy clean energy technologies with an eye toward creating jobs. And if the American Jobs Plan passes, this will be able to be put on steroids. So in the past 2 weeks, just as an example, we made 2 announcements on research, one on research and one on deployment of offshore wind. The research one was to cut the cost of solar by half yet again in the next 10 years. And on offshore wind, it was to add 30 gigawatts of offshore wind energy on the Atlantic seaboard, again within 10 years. Today, we are announcing another two funding opportunities for clean energy technology. One of them is to create next generation biofuels for airplanes and ships, which are very hard to electrify. And the second is to announce clean energy technology funding opportunity to reduce methane emissions from the coal, oil, and gas industry. And as many of you know, methane is an extremely potent and dangerous greenhouse gas. But these investments are really just a down payment on what we need to do as a nation, and the American Jobs Project will take us the rest of the way. And I want to emphasize because I've been meeting with so many stakeholders on this, the true importance of ensuring that 40% of the benefits of the American Jobs Plan go to communities that have been left behind or unseen, people who have been in the shadows of power plants and whose children have to gasp to breathe or use an inhaler. We need to remedy a moral wrong and make those investments, and the American Jobs Plan will allow us to do that. It's a once-in-a-century investment to seize a once-in-a-century opportunity. That's what the people elected Joe Biden to do, and we've waited far too long to do it. So we're going to get it done. We're going to put America to work, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Secretary. If I can shift gears a little bit, one of the things in the President's infrastructure package was investments in advanced nuclear development. One of the things I know you mentioned, you reiterated during your confirmation hearings, the President's opposition to funding for a nuclear fuel repository in Apple Mountain. Where does the Biden administration plan to store the nation's spent radioactive nuclear fuel, and what's the ongoing process of that review?
Yeah, some of you may recall there was a bipartisan commission on what to do about spent nuclear fuel. There has to be a consent-based process to be able to do that. We are beginning that work inside of the Department of Energy. We have to find a solution, but it has to be based on, community agreement.
Is there a timetable for that review? When you
We'll be making an announcement on that. Not ready to say yet.
And then just start changing gears again. The last administration invested heavily in the nation's nuclear triad, the development of new and improved nuclear weaponry. Is the policy of this administration that a lot of this development falls under your department to continue that R&D, that expensive R&D to modernize the nation's nuclear arsenal?
We have to modernize the nation's nuclear arsenal. We have to keep and maintain the stockpile to make sure that it is safe and effective, and we will continue to do that to ensure that we can deter nuclear aggression from other countries. So our nuclear deterrent is important, and it is embedded in the values of that stockpile, and we'll make sure that our people are safe.
Thank you so much. I've heard you talk about the corporate tax rate and what they want to do with this infrastructure bill. Can this infrastructure bill be successful with a 25% corporate tax rate?
You know, as the president has said, this is a negotiation, and he really does want to hear from Democrats and Republicans about what would be acceptable to get this across the line. So there is room for negotiation. His point is that it has to be paid for. And so if it's not a 28%, what else is it? And we're very encouraged by those who have been bringing ideas forth, and we are hopeful that, especially when Congress gets back next week, that those discussions can begin in earnest.
All right. Thank you. You're one of the 5 cabinet secretaries that the president is tasked with engaging with Congress on this. You mentioned the president's willing to negotiate. He says he's open to alternative ways to pay for this if Republicans put forth any. In your conversations at all, have you heard any such alternatives from Republican members?
I have. Yeah, I'm not going to make announcements for them. They obviously want to bring forth their own ideas, but I have heard alternatives, yes.
And the president also asked you to help engage the public in selling this plan. You haven't hit the road yet, though. Is that something that you plan to do in the coming weeks?
Well, we're going to be taking our guidance, from the White House in terms of what's safe, et cetera. We've certainly been hitting the Zoom and making our case through that and the phones. So we'll see, how it goes. There is a period of time that we have to be able to do this, but we want to make sure that it's safe.
Emma?
Yeah, in terms of the negotiations, the discussions with Congress, is there a deadline? Is there a time frame where this turns into a pumpkin? Or you just go it alone?
Yeah, I don't know if you want to answer that, Jen.
We'll have a whole briefing after this.
Yeah, I know that they said that they would like to see progress by Memorial Day, and hopefully we can start to see that, but obviously those meetings have to begin in earnest next week.
Francesca?
Thank you. What do you say to Americans working in the oil and gas industry in California and elsewhere who say that these have been good paying jobs that have given them access to the middle class? And what, if anything, can the federal government do to ensure that these clean energy jobs, like the ones that you described, are as good as the ones that they'll be replacing?
Yeah, this is a great question. And this is why the American Jobs Plan is very specifically targeting communities in coal and power plant areas, in gas and natural gas. There are billions of dollars in this bill for the technologies that will reduce CO2 emissions in those industries. For example, carbon capture, use and sequestration. I don't mean to get too technical, but hydrogen deployment and demonstration projects. I've been talking with my counterparts around the world. There is a huge appetite for a partnership with America on these next generation technologies that will reduce CO2 emissions from that kind of baseline power. Those jobs in those kind of technologies are good paying jobs. Those are jobs that are going to be for welders and sheet metal workers and all of the trades. And we're going to, as we put out funding opportunities, ensure that there are project labor agreements, that the people who are working in them are paid under Davis-Bacon, are paid